Cisco 49 is deep in the heart. Like Joe Montana in the corner, D. Clark. Garrison Hurst, stiff farm going 99. Don't get it twisted.
This is the 49er Faithful UK show, and this is week 7. The Chiefs visit Levi's, fresh off their bye week, with us still, I think, enjoying a Victory Friday, so a mini bye week of our own. A little bit of history to this. We'll probably come into some of that a little bit later. We'll see. I'm Gareth Ellis, and I am joined by the one, the only, is Paul Hope.
Good to be back, Gareth. What's up, Faithful?
Yeah, nice to see you. Good of you to join us.
I know. First pod in 2 years that I wasn't able
really?
to do.
Wow.
Yeah. So
I know it's been unusual, but obviously, just the A team tonight with Lee and Nadgy sending apologies.
We're at that stage of the season, aren't we, buddy? Contract holdouts, injuries, can't have a full roster every week, so we'll manage. We will have to manage. History corner. There's no Lee, but I think Paul, you've excelled yourself, and you've done a little bit of history corner, and are basically making Lee completely redundant. I wouldn't go that far, but yes, with Gowland missing, I thought I'd do a little bit of research. So the Chiefs lead the head-to-head 9-7, and that does include, Gareth, those 2 Super Bowl losses.
Well,
our
really?
last, PTSD when you see the Chiefs. Our last win over Sunday's opponents was when Alex Smith returned to Levi's Stadium to face Colin Kaepernick, and the Niners won 22-17. In the 4 games we faced Mahomes and Reed, we've either been blown out or had our hearts ripped out on the biggest stage. No wonder Gowland didn't want to do History Corner for this one, Gareth.
I don't blame him, to be fair. I think we kind of didn't need it. We do know the recent history. I suppose before these Super Bowl matchups, the one notable thing was you mentioned a quarterback there who's played for both teams. I think there was another quarterback who famously played for both teams. I think that was the most interesting Niners-Chiefs history up until about February, was it 2020? So, a lot of people, the NFL, everyone's going to make a lot of this being a Super Bowl rematch. And obviously the broadcasters are, it's going to be mentioned over and over again. The players have come out and said, look, this is just another game. On our season preview show, we said, look, this is it's a game against an AFC opponent. It's at the time of year, it's probably not going to be definitive for either team. Is this just another game for the players? I'm thinking specifically of the Eagles game last year, where it wasn't just another game, was it?
No, it's preparing for this one. I said to Lee on the live last night, Gareth, that when Brad from the UK Chiefs group reached out and said, do you want to have a joint meet-up? I thought, it's the Chiefs. Now, I'm not one of those Niners fans that hates the Chiefs. I quite enjoy watching Mahomes play. The Chiefs can be quite exciting, but our recent history, they've caused some upset for me as a Niners fan. And it's strange because Steve Young said it. Even if we blow these guys out on Sunday, Gareth, it will not make up for the Super Bowl losses. The only thing that will make up for a Super Bowl loss is actually winning the Super Bowl. But I think, to quote Steve Young, and this is where I'm going, rabbit hole already, there was that famous quote about getting that monkey off his back. And whereas I agree with you, in the grand scheme of things, on the stat sheet, it's a game against an AFC rival. I think if we can get the win for this one, the momentum, and as you've alluded to that Eagles game last year, we all saw what happened. We went into Philadelphia, the neutral thought the Niners were getting blown out, and we took their soul. Now, I'm not saying we're going to take Mahomes and Andy Reid's soul on Sunday, Gareth, but I think there's a little bit more spice to this one being a Week 7 game than we'd like to admit, if that's fair to say.
Absolutely. I think the players are making the right noises. They're looking at it as business as usual. It's just another game. It is. I do feel you've summed it up really with the monkey on the back. If they can get that win, I think that'll exercise a few demons. I think it'll help people. I think it'll set us up nicely for the rest of the season to come. I do wonder whether a loss again is going to potentially be a bit deflating. though obviously we've got another game before the bye week as well, which is potentially another interesting matchup in that game. But we'll get to that when we get to it. I do think there is something more. I do think certainly for the fans it is perhaps important to get the win and prove that we can. Part of me is sort of, if we come up with a blueprint and beat them, we've kind of shown our hand there as well. And I think that's a tricky one there. Obviously, Shanahan has not been able to get over on Andy Reid or Steve Spagnuolo. Is this the time to do it? It almost feels to me, if you go into your bag of tricks now, what have you got next time? If there is indeed a next time this season, am I making any sense? I don't even know I'm making sense to myself on that.
Of course, you always make sense, Gareth. No, that's a fair point. I mean, we had this at Christmas with the Ravens. We dusted that loss down because, as you said, the Ravens were potential Super Bowl rivals. So the talk was, had Shanahan kind of game planned for not showing everything off? I'm plugged in. Deebo Samuel has a podcast. We're competing against our own team now, Gareth. He had Mr. Kittle on his podcast this week. And when they broached the subject of this game, George was very excitable. And he was like, these are the games as players we want to play in. I want to play against the best. I want to go against the best. Fred Warner has come out and said, 15 haunts my nightmares. Nick Bosa is still replaying that 4th and 2 or 4th and 3, the zone read where Mahomes escaped and ultimately sealed the Super Bowl. But I think if we can get over the hump on this one, like you said, and if Shanahan can kind of get that kind of, right, I've got one over Spagnuolo, and we'll get into the semantics of how Spagnuolo's defence is going up this year, because they're a little bit different, Gareth, which surprised me doing my prep for this. But I think ultimately Shanahan can't hold anything back. And given the injuries we've got, maybe we do see a game for the ages. You chaps called your show the greatest show ever last week.
It was.
Maybe there's going to be some bold predictions at the end of this one, Gareth, because I don't know about you. I'd love to see a win over Mahomes and Reid. I said it at the start of the show. I've not seen a win over them since Mahomes and Reid became the starting quarterback. It's been nothing but pain. Jimmy G going down injured, the first Super Bowl loss. They then came to Levi's and absolutely blew us out. And then the Super Bowl loss in Leeds. So you think, would you won? And that's what I'll be saying to the Chiefs fans in Newcastle on Sunday. Let us have one. You've had 3 Super Bowls. You've won 4. Surely it's our time to have one, Gareth.
I agree. I think if you are going to treat this as just another game, you go out and win it. And you look and you can think about the last time we had the matchup as you would with any other team. And you can think about that as a game. It would be interesting to see whether they review any game tape from the last time these teams played, or whether that's just a little bit too much, or whether that's going to be motivational. Don't know. Be interesting to be on a fly on the wall in that video watching room, wouldn't it?
I think they have looked at some game tape, because I think Shanahan alluded to the blitz packages was 35% more in the Super Bowl than it was in the season. And I think Bosa had said it was emotional watching, but the professional side was, as you've just said, that was the past and we need to watch the game tape. And I suppose the interesting thing with the Chiefs, Gareth, is they haven't had that turnover of staff and players. Well, they've lost a couple of players, as most teams do, but the replacements they've drafted have been quite good. But Spagnuolo's still there, Andy Reid's still there. They've still got the same defensive scheme, but Spagnuolo's known as the mad scientist, and we're going to get into all that and what we feel we'll see this weekend.
Yeah, we'll get into that. There is one other sort of thing, the elephant in the room almost. It's not just from us. It's this narrative that the Chiefs are getting more than their fair share of referee calls in their favour. I think you've even got a stat on this, Paul, because you have a stat on everything. How true is it, or is it just a question of they win a lot, so people remember the bad calls?
Yeah, I think like any sport, so people who were listening know I don't do English football, but when I did do English football, Gareth, Manchester United and Sir Alex Ferguson were at the height of their powers, and they always seemed to get the rub of the draw. They always seem to get that 97th minute decision or the equaliser or the referee decisions. And when I've been preparing for this, like I said, I do see a lot on social media, other fan bases on at the Chiefs as much as we are. But Brad, who is the contact at the Chiefs UK group, he'd shared a tweet a couple of weeks ago where he was bemoaning the referees' calls against the Chiefs. And I had to pause, Gareth, and think, Brad, that's a little bit.
It's quite ironic.
Now, I don't have the stats as such, but I think what you're alluding to off air, we were talking. John Chapman, good friend of the show, he shared a tweet, Gareth, from the NFL Ref Stats account, which is a verified account. And it says that this weekend's referee, Alan Eck, and his crew, home teams like the 49ers have a 16-6 record, which is a 72% win percentage. That is because this crew places more focus on the line of scrimmage. They rank number 1 for delay of game and defensive offside penalties, and they call above average on offensive holding and ineligible man downfield. Apparently, they also put an emphasis on discipline-related penalties, and they rank number 1 in the league for unnecessary roughness. So, given this in the trenches, as you've said, we've played 2 Super Bowls against the Chiefs, and I don't think Chiefs have had an offensive holding call. I think we've all seen the clips of Nick Bosa, and non-Niners fans, Gareth, like to say, oh, you're whining, you're 40 whiners, but you go back and watch those game tapes, Bosa's held.
It is difficult not to say that the refs have missed it. Again, the refs missed on both sides, but...
And I know Nadgy would be cringing right now. Nadgy does not
this is why we're doing it.
About the referees. And I know, when you mentioned it to me off air, I thought, yeah, it is the elephant in the room, because I put a post out in our group ahead of the watch party to say, look, we are the guests of the UK Chiefs group. I don't want to hear any of this on Sunday night. All good banter aside, I don't want to see any kind of negative and moaning. And like Nadgy said, if you're blaming the referees for a loss, then fundamentally as a football team, you're doing a lot worse than that. But I do think in this particular fixture, and given the way we play, and Nick Bosa to our defence, Gareth, is like Chris Jones to their defence. And if he suddenly started getting non-holding calls, or, if Mahomes wasn't getting the roughing the passer calls, and it goes back to when Brady was the quarterback. Brady just had to look at the referee the right way, didn't he, Gareth? And he'd get the flag. And I think we saw it. Brock Purdy first come to the league. He took some early hits that we sat at home thinking, that's a roughing the passer call. But now Purdy's kind of broke into that top 10 of the quarterback in the NFL. And I can say that because that is official if you've not been watching Brock Purdy. But who knows, Gareth, maybe this referee crew has been put in place by the NFL on purpose to maybe dispel those myths on Sunday. What do you reckon, buddy?
I don't know. I think it's, you notice referee decisions when you lose a game. And the truth is, over the last few years, most people who've played the Chiefs have ended up losing those games because of their record over those last few years. I do think this isn't saying it's any sort of conspiracy or organised in this way, but I do think if you're a player, if you're struggling as an offensive lineman to contain your defensive end or the pass rusher, the refs can see that. They can see the players that are potentially struggling. I think you're more likely to get a holding call against that offensive lineman who's obviously struggling. You're more likely to, I think, get a defensive pass interference against a cornerback who's clearly struggling against a wide receiver. And I think because the Chiefs have just been so good across all of their team, they generally aren't the ones necessarily struggling. And so I think the referee don't see that, and don't see those 50-50s seem to always fall their side because they always seem to be on top of the game. If you it certainly makes sense to me, and it's not the referees doing anything other than human nature, because I think that's obvious. We can see that as players. If you see a cornerback who's struggling, we're just sitting there waiting for that flag to be thrown because we can see it, and the refs can see that as well. And so I do think that's potentially part of why the better teams perhaps get less penalties as well, as well as being fundamentally a better team, I think they're more likely to get the benefit of the doubt off a referee purely from a human nature point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I watched the Jets Bills on Monday night, and Aaron Rodgers was bemoaning the referees afterwards. Obviously, I didn't get to do the Seahawks game with you chaps, but that missed call where we're all sat at home, and Amazon have showed us the ball hitting the Seahawks player's hand, and then the NFL are saying, "Oh, we didn't have that footage actually." So, as you've said, you can have all the technology, you can have multiple referees on the pitch, but sometimes it does come down to human error, it comes down to interpretation. But I hope when the Awesome Foursome returns next week, we're not sat here discussing a missed hold on Bosa or a referee call that's decided the game. So I think it was right to get the elephant in the room out the way. But Nadgy is probably saying, chaps, move on. Stop talking about the referees.
Well, I think we have put it record. I don't think that either refereeing decisions weren't responsible for either Super Bowl loss. So they're the things, the little bits that don't go your way that seem to stack up when you've lost. Anyway, let's move on to more cheerful things. Injuries. The Chiefs coming off their bye week, obviously, that's a conspiracy. Pretty fit. Only defensive end Mike Danner is listed as not practicing. They're pretty healthy. Early bye week, something that might not be so good come the end of the season, but we'll see how that goes. As for the 49ers, obviously our injuries have been piling up. Juwan Jennings and Malik Collins have not practiced this week. Some limited. Malik Mustafa, it's good to see that he's limited. Debo, I think that was a bit of a surprise, but I think he had picked up a knock in the game. Jordan Mason, we knew about. I think Jordan Elliott, Darrell Luter Jr. But let's finish with something positive. Ricky Purcell, full practice. Yeah,
I mean, Johnny Dell was on with me and Lee last night, breaking some players down. And to be fair, Gareth, the knowledge Johnny has way above anything that I know. But it was a joy to sit there and watch him break down the game tape. And he had our attention because he kept mentioning Ricky Purcell ahead of this game. So I was thinking, do we have an exclusive? So after we finished recording last night, straight on Twitter, Purcell is practicing, but they haven't activated him to the full roster yet. But football aside, cast your mind back, 10 weeks ago, was it, Gareth, when the news broke on a Saturday that our draft pick had been shot in the chest, to think he's actually back and he's running routes. And I don't know if you heard the humour side. So at the end of practice, Shanahan called Purcell in to break it down. And apparently he was absolutely gassed and he couldn't get his words out. So all the players were laughing. And I think Kittle had alluded to, it just goes to show game speed is different to being gym speed. But I do think he may add something to this offense. But we definitely won't see him on Sunday. But as you alluded to, we do have another important game coming up. So let's face it, could he score his first touchdown against the Cowboys at home? Now, there's a story, but we'll get on to that next week.
I think it depends how he practiced, but yeah, that's for next week. But obviously, I could see him coming back after the bye. You think, let's not rush you in. Unless, of course, we find out that either Jennings or Debo can't go. Then I think there's a decision to be made, isn't there? But I think at the moment, as long as we've got full our first three receivers, no need to necessarily rush him back. Bring him back when we need. Jordan Mason, I think, would be a big loss. Obviously, I'm not sure Isaac Guerendo is quite ready to be carrying the ball 20, 25 times a game. I doubt, of course, he would, but could be a loss.
I think Patrick Taylor would be the back. I know Nadgy was a little bit harsh on Guerendo.
No.
But when
Nadgy.
When we were doing the prep for the draft and I'd subscribed to John Chapman's website, you got a full playbook, Gareth, of all the draft candidates. And I did a bit more research on Guerendo because it kind of caught my eye as someone Shanahan would like. And I said this to Lee, he's exactly the same as he's in college. He's either boom or bust. And as Nadgy said, home run. That's what he played in college. He was either out 60, 70-yard runs or it was 1 or 2. But I agree with you. I think if Mason can't go on Sunday, it'll be Patrick Taylor. But I think Mason's had, like you said, the non-contact jersey on. So even if he's past fit, we may see a split field of Taylor getting the bulk of the runs and maybe Mason coming in the red zone. But
well, let's go on to that. You've got a graphic. We will start, as always, with our opponent's offense. And the gentleman who needs no introduction, so he won't get one, number 15. But their offense, they're struggling to get points. This isn't perhaps the high-powered offense of the past. They've obviously lost a couple of key players for the season with injury on the wide receiver room. Run us through what they've got left, Paul.
Yeah, so interestingly, I thought you'd start there, Gareth, with so much for this being a down year for Mahomes. Now, it depends on which way you look at it. As you've said there, it isn't the high-powered offense that's scoring 50 touchdowns this season, 5,000 yards. But when you look at the numbers, it quite surprised me that, believe it or not, Mahomes has been pretty solid this year. And that's even, as you said there, without his favourite targets. They lost Rice for a good chunk of the season early on. So through the first 5 games of the season, Gareth, Mahomes is completing passes at a career high rate of 69.4%. But the struggles is he's thrown 6 touchdowns, but 6 interceptions, which seems a little bit strange for Patrick. What do you make of that stat there before we go any further? Because I was a little bit confused at that.
It's immediately surprising. I think we knew, perhaps carrying on from last season, that the Chiefs have changed to be perhaps a defense first, which sounds odd with Mahomes there, but I think they know that having Mahomes is always going to give them a foundation, a floor to their offense, which is probably high, puts them at the midpoint of the league, just with him alone, with nothing, with no other weapons. So I think they've done the sensible thing in investing in that defensive side of the ball, and they've got a decent O-line, and I think that shows if you've got a good quarterback or great quarterback, and the foundation of you're not going to get bullied in the trenches, you can make it work with unheralded players elsewhere. You spread the ball around. Obviously, the Travis Kelce is still there, but I think it's showing that the Chiefs always seem to be able to do just enough, or Mahomes can always do just enough to just get enough points, just get enough yards, just get enough first downs. And it might not look pretty on the stats, but they get the job done, this offense, I think.
Yeah, I think what Mahomes has transitioned to, if you cast your mind back to that regular season game where I said the blue was out at Levi's and Mahomes was quite surgical that day, his yards per attempt, 7.7 this season. So for context, Brock's is 8.8. As I said there, he's thrown for 1,235 yards. Brock's thrown for 1,632. But at his current pace, if Mahomes maintains this throughout the end of the season, Gareth, he'll finish with 4,199 yards, which is more than he had last season, but the third lowest mark of his career. So I think that's where I did the same as you. I thought, right, preparing for the offense tonight. Nadgy's not here. Mahomes hasn't lit it up, but the Chiefs are 5-0. We'll get onto the defense. But then you look at the injuries and you think, wow, he didn't have Rice. So then you look at the other playmakers, and he's been forced to spread the ball around. In their last victory, 26-13 over the Saints, Mahomes completed passes to 8 different receivers. And I know you've got the depth chart up there for people watching on YouTube. And, Worthy was a first-round pick, but he's got, Smith-Schuster, Watson, Travis Kelce wasn't really featured the first 3 games. Sky Moore, McCall Hardman. They're not being set in the league alight, but as you said, they've been getting the job done. And I think the knock on Andy Reid, which is crazy given his record in this league, they haven't scored 30 points once this season. And I think teams
5-0. They haven't needed to.
That's what I was about to say. Like for me, the 5-0, they had an injury in the running back room, so they've had to bring Kareem Hunt back into the backfield. But where I started to get nervous, you mentioned Travis Kelce. In the last 2 weeks, Gareth, he's resumed his place as Mahomes' top target. So he's had 19 targets over the last 2 games. He'd only had 12 targets in the first 3. He's broke our heart. Kelsey's not the great route runner. He's not a great blocker. But he's one of those players in the NFL that has that connection with Mahomes. He just seems to get open, doesn't he, Gareth?
He's always open.
You just can't
Yeah.
sort of, I was going to say...
That's a good matchup. Obviously, Fred Warner. We've talked about it before with Fred and Dre. I think in the Super Bowl preview, and obviously we know that Dre wasn't able to last the game, and that was perhaps a big factor because they found that space. I am concerned potentially about Devondre Campbell and how he might match up for Mahomes attacking the middle of the field with these shorter passes. He's got gone away from that deep ball threat, and they're giving these perhaps less heralded receivers, I think, shorter passes. So it's going to be a test, I think, for whoever we've got out at safety and linebacker, and that's going to be an important matchup because we are a little bit thin and perhaps not as strong depth linebacker as we thought. So that's going to be, I think, a key matchup potentially. Those sort of players and players coming out of the backfield or in motion and coming across into that linebacker area. Perhaps not so much corners, but could see me proven wrong.
No, I think you're right in what you're saying. The Chiefs have basically become the team that Brock Purdy was with the 49ers when Purdy first came to the league. You know, those throws behind the line of scrimmage, the yak throws, and we got hammered by neutrals. And Mahomes and the Chiefs have transitioned into that style of football, similar to us this year. They move the ball quite well up the field, get to the red zone, Gareth, and they're really struggling in the red zone at the moment. In 18 trips inside the 20-yard line, they've scored a touchdown just 7 times, which is a 38% conversion rate.
That's worse than us. And
29th in the league. Yeah, it's worse than us. And Mahomes has only attempted 25 passes in those 18 trips inside the 20-yard line. And interestingly, I don't know if you've seen, they've tried a couple of trick plays. So the ball's been snapped to Kelsey. He's done a shuttle pass. It's been snapped to, I think it was a rookie running back. And they've tried to do this kind of misdirection. And in the red zone, they've had their struggles, which when I started prepping for this last week and plugged into the Chiefs fandom and what they're doing on Twitter, they're 5-0. So life is all rosy in Chiefs Kingdom. But as you said, this isn't the same high-powered offense that isn't coming into Levi's to blow us out. But 15 is the difference maker. And I'm not going to go on a podcast, Gareth, and say any slander about Patrick Mahomes, because that would just come back to bite me in the bum, buddy.
Yeah, he is. He is still Patrick Mahomes, regardless of what any stats say. And we know that stats don't always give you the full picture. Hopefully, I think you mentioned earlier, Nick Bosa, perhaps got some unfinished business. I think we need to get Mahomes uncomfortable. I think that's he's very good when he's off script, but you know, number one on your to-do list has got to be making things as difficult for Mahomes as you possibly can. I did mention it earlier that they have had a strong O-line. And I think they've had some injuries along there, or some turnover on the O-line, but I think they're young as well. Did I see somewhere? I think they're the youngest or one of the youngest O-lines in the league.
So there was a draft crush that people had, and I knew you were going to make me pronounce this. So Kingsley Suamatia was one of the draft crushes of people, and the Chiefs took him, and he's been benched for Morris because the Kingsley is accounted for 2 of the 5 sacks allowed in the time he's been on the field. But as you've said time and time again, Gareth, the best way to keep your quarterback out of harm's way and behind a good offensive line is get the ball out quick. Yeah. And that's what Mahomes is doing. I remember talking to Lee about Aaron Rodgers coming into Levi's with Green Bay, and we just couldn't get near Rodgers because the ball was out of his hands in like 1.7 seconds. And that's what Mahomes is doing. So Nick Bosa's get-off is really quick. But, you know, if the quarterback's getting the ball out of his hand under 2 seconds, Gareth, your defensive linemen are not getting there. And then, like you said, it becomes the yards after the catch. And you've alluded to our linebackers, aside from Fred, it does worry me that they may target Campbell because he hasn't been great in coverage this year. So it is something to worry about. But yeah, looking along the stats, they've allowed a couple of sacks here and there, but the offensive line generally is a strength of the Chiefs, but that's basically because they've got Patrick Mahomes, and if it breaks down, he can take off.
I think I've seen enough of the Chiefs' offense. Should we switch them over?
Let's switch them over. So let's have a little look and see
a
if
fearsome
I can do this.
Fearsome defense. Obviously, slightly different than the last time we played. They lost L'Jarius Sneed, which must admit I was pretty surprised over. That perhaps they were happy to let him walk, but I think we always know Spagnuolo is the top defensive coordinator in the league, and he's clearly got an eye for picking some players as well. So, and I think that's where they've let some of this turnover happen because they're happy with the unit. It's that do your job approach, isn't it, that all the best units have.
Yeah, I mean, I'll get to it in the scouting report in a moment.
Yeah, have at it.
Basically, you've already mentioned there, so they let Sneed go, and Jalen Watson has stepped in nicely. So there hasn't been a drop-off, but I think that does help with the defence he's come into. For all the talk, Gareth, we started the show talking about Patrick Mahomes, the Chiefs' offence. It's this defence that is the best part of their team. It's the best unit that's going to be on the field by whatever metric you look at, what stats you use, PFF, wherever you get this Chiefs defence. It's rare for one of the best defences in the NFL to be this good 3 years in a row. And that's what the Chiefs have been doing, Gareth.
Yeah, they make things incredibly difficult for an opponent's offence.
I was going to go into the depth I've done recently, but because I knew there was only the two of us, I've decided to go a little bit different. So throughout this consistency that they've had, they've been known for a few characteristics. One is a love of being aggressive, especially on third down blitzes. They've got a plethora of talented cornerbacks who are not afraid to play press man-to-man coverage. I mean, obviously it helps when your pass rush has Chris Jones, who George Kittle himself has said is getting the Aaron Donald treatment this week. So there's the respect that I've got on Chris Jones. But you've mentioned this before, Gareth, so I wanted to get your opinion before I moved on any further.
Careful.
So in the NFL, most defenses either have a good pass rush or they have a good secondary. It's very rare you match them up together. But if you're good at both, that's got to be a dangerous combination. And that's what I wanted to ask you before I moved on.
What? Which one I'd pick over the other?
Yeah. Which one would you pick on the other?
I would go for the specifically the pass rush or the defensive line as a unit in general. I'd always go for the defensive line because the trenches are involved in every single play. They matter on every single play. If you're going to run the ball 3 yards up the middle, you can argue that secondary, it doesn't matter how good or how bad it is, whereas the defensive line matters every single play. And I'd also say from the pass rush point of view, to me, there's a cause and effect. One is the quarterback throwing the ball. Number two is the receiver catching it. If you take away number one, it doesn't matter how good the receivers are or how wide open they are if your quarterback's in the dirt. And that, to me, it's like plan A is stop the quarterback throwing it. Plan B is stop the receiver catching it. If you go for just plan B, stopping the receiver, you've got nothing to fall back on if that doesn't work. So that is my logic of why I would perhaps put more in the defensive line than I would put in the secondary. However, the game isn't played on logic and the game isn't played like that. I think it comes back to you make the best of the players that you've got and you make the best scheme. And it's down to the coordinator using that in the best way. So blitzing at the right time or dropping back into the coverage. So it's, on paper, I would go for the defensive line, but I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer. But that's my logic. No, I'm sticking with it.
No. I mean, the reason I asked that question is the Chiefs have been good at both. So what they've normally been good under the mad scientist is being very aggressive on blitzing. And they've got that kind of safety net that they've had those cornerbacks behind who've been very good in man coverage and they've been able to kind of lock down the receivers. So normally if the quarterback's scrambling to get away from the pass rush, if he can't get that ball out quickly because they're all covered, it's a recipe for disaster. Now, one way teams had been taking advantage of this strength. There's just 3 phases to your defence. And traditionally, the Chiefs have struggled against the run. Now, that is where I've focused a lot of my energy, because we all know how much Kyle Shanahan likes to run the ball, Gareth. However, the Chiefs have a new feature on their defence this year. Can you guess what it is, buddy, before I go any further?
Have they completely shut down the run?
They have completely punished opposing running backs. So far this year, they've only played 5 games. I appreciate people. No opposing running back with 11 or more rush attempts has hit 50 yards.
Wow.
Now, this list includes Alvin Kamara, who was held to 26 yards, Derrick Henry, who was held to 46 yards, Bijan Robinson at the Falcons, who was having a good season, was held to 31 yards, and J.K. Dobbins was held to 32 yards. So when you break those down, they held Kamara at 2.4 yards per carry, Henry 3.5 per carry, Robinson 1.9 per carry, and Dobbins 2.3 yards per carry. Now, another interesting area, which all 49ers fans are going to cringe when I say this, the Chiefs have played 21 defenders so far this season. And when an opponent has ran the ball, that group of players, Gareth, has only missed 13 tackles all season. And that was according to Pro Football Focus.
I think we've missed 13 tackles a game.
Or the equivalent of one drive for the 49ers defence.
I mean, one game. But yeah,
it's harsh. Now, I've got another question for you, buddy.
It's do your job, isn't it? It's do your job.
It is. So, which player has gained the most rushing yards against the Chiefs this season? Can you have a guess, or do you think who jumps off the page?
Most rushing yards.
Yeah. So bear in mind, I've just taken
was it
4
Lamar?
of the best stuff. It was Lamar Jackson.
There we are.
He had 122 yards,
Wow.
but most of those were Lamar Jackson scrambling out the pocket, going for 6 yards here, going for 7 yards there. The longest run that they've surrendered to an opponent this year, Gareth, is 20 yards on one play, which is first in the NFL. And that was a jet sweep by our good friend, Ray McLeod.
Hey, good old Ray. I was going to say, it's good that, Lamar Jackson's good at scrambling, but he's no Brock Purdy, is he? So
he's no Brock Purdy, no. I mean, a big reason for this success, what the Chiefs have done well, when you try to run the ball on them now, the 2 interior defensive linemen that the players tend to run into are Jones and Pennell. And they have a combined weight, Gareth, of 640 pounds. And as we've said on this show before, Chris Jones is a superstar. And we've seen what Nick Bosa has been doing this year, getting those pressures and not necessarily getting the sacks. But if the running backs are trying to hit those gaps, they're hitting one of them 2. And then obviously they're not going anywhere. Now, with teams struggling to run the ball, Johnny Dell talked about this last night. 3rd down is a bit of an issue for opposing offences. The Chiefs are holding opponents, Gareth, to a 31.1% 3rd down conversion rate. So what teams are doing is they're struggling to run the ball, but they were equally struggling to pass the ball as well, because as I said before, that pass rush and the talented cornerbacks. So Johnny Dell said, we don't want to be in 3rd and long, because that is a world of pain against these Chiefs. And when you look at the roster and you look at the scheme they play, we saw that firsthand in the Super Bowl, which I'm sorry to mention, people. I'm trying not to mention it, Gareth.
Yeah, it's unavoidable.
It is unavoidable. They've only allowed 64.3 rushing yards per game in this last month, and they're holding opponents to an average of 17 points per game, which is the 6th fewest in the league. So you're seeing those struggles that teams are having against them reflected in the scoreboard. And I think we've said before in this show, you're only scoring 17 points in the NFL. You're not winning games with 17 points, are you, Gareth?
No, but I think that's what the Chiefs have been doing well. Their offense might only be scoring 17 points, but if their defense is keeping opponents to 10, then 17 is enough. And I think it's the complementary football. It's the fact that their defense is always going to keep things close. And when things are close, Mahomes is always going to give them a chance. And that's how I think they're 5-0 without playing particularly well.
Yeah, I focused on the run to begin with because we're Niners fans. So I thought, surely, Gareth, they've got to give something up. So I thought, right, I'll look on the wide receivers they've faced. Jamar Chase was held to 35 yards. Zay Flowers, 37 yards. Chris Olave, 10. Now, I focused on them three because they tend to be the names that jumped off the page and a lot of people take in fantasy football. But when you look at the front seven they've got, you've got some names on there. Chris Jones, Nick Bolton. Leo Chanel, he's a name that, if you cast your mind back, he's the guy responsible for, in the Super Bowl, that first drive where he knocked the ball out with McCaffrey's hands. So I thought, now, we've just been talking about this defence for the last 15 minutes, and I haven't even mentioned one of your favourites, Trent McDuffie. Now, Gareth Ellis, you always tell me if a cornerback isn't getting noticed, that'll do for you. And as I said, I hadn't even mentioned him at first, and then I was like, is he still there? Because like you said, they've had a high turnover of some of the players going, and it's just, they've replaced safety. Connor looks like he's going to be a problem. I've already mentioned Jalen Watson stepped in place for Snead. And for all the love that Chris Jones and McDuffie get, it's that boy Leo that I've just mentioned. He's like their Fred Warner, but they move him around. Mm-hmm. He's so versatile. Now, Nadgy always tells us off, Gareth, for just looking at the stats. So I tried to do some better homework. So when you look at the stats, in 145 defensive snaps, Leo has played 5 positions on this defense for the Chiefs. He's played both off-ball linebacker spots. He's played defensive end. He's played defensive tackle. And he's played slot corner. Now, the reason I wanted to concentrate on this...
A guy plays defensive tackle and slot corner.
Yeah. I thought... I double-checked this as well before I wrote it down. Now, where I say the stats don't do him justice, 18 tackles, 1 forced fumble, 2 pass breakups. But for those who love PFF, and El Presidente is one of them, he's been one of the highest graded Chiefs players this year. He's had a 78.7 overall. And that's because of the impact. If they move him to defensive end, it frees up Chris Jones. If they move him into slot corner, it frees up McDuffie. Now, he hasn't committed a penalty. He's only allowed 17 receiving yards when in coverage. The penalty one I thought you would get. And he's only missed 1 tackle all season. And I've just said to you there, he's played in 5 different slots on the defence and he's only missed 1 tackle. Unfortunately, I'm linking it back to that dreadful night in February. He was the highest graded player on the night, Gareth. He had a 92 overall. And unfortunately for us Niners fans, he has continued that form. And the reason I focused on him rather than Chris Jones is that versatility is important because it allows the Chiefs to use more alignments on the defensive line, especially when they put him as a defensive tackle in the 3 technique, because he's too quick to be double teamed, but he's also quite strong enough to hold his ground where if the back gets through, somebody else can come in and make the tackle. And I think that's what they've done quite well under Spagnuolo. They're kind of moving these key pieces around and doing what Shanahan does on the offense. Deebo Samuel is your wide receiver, is your wide back. And I think Spagnuolo's taken that kind of philosophy on the defensive side of the ball, Gareth, and he's cooking up a storm. So they're only ranked 9th overall on the defense. But when I looked at the game tape this week, I thought that this was the best defense we played all last year. Yeah. And I have to say, Gareth, I think it's going to be the best we face this year. What's your thoughts, buddy?
Thanks, Paul. You've really cheered me up for that, really, with some of those stats. As you said, the players have got a relish going up against this. I think on the plus side, of course, Purdy has seen this defence before, at least this defensive coordinator before. Some people may have been critical of Purdy's performance in the Super Bowl. I thought he did fantastically well to not throw any picks. Because you've said how tight this defense locks everything down, and you've got to be very careful about picking your passes and getting the ball out to the right place at the right time, or this defense is gonna take that off you, or at least make it very difficult for you. I think it's going to be a huge test for our O-line, which I think has done better in the last couple of weeks, but they've also, I think, been facing some fairly feeble pass rushes. I think Shanahan does need to work with Purdy to get the ball out quicker. I think we need to get back to some of those short, quick passes that we've seen before. And obviously, that used to be something that CMC was a big part of. We've got to find a way to replace that part of the game without CMC there. So there's some work cut out for Shanahan, but I'm sure he's been thinking about this for 7 months, something like that. Thinking about where it didn't work last time. I'm sure Purdy's been thinking about the same. I'm sure everybody on that offense has been thinking the same. And of course, back to the Super Bowl. Other than Juwan Jennings, everyone else had a relatively quiet game from the stats point of view. And I think some of those players, Debo, Ayuk, Kittle, they're all going to want to be able to put that right. So I think they're all going to be clamouring for some part of the game plan. They're all going to want to be the target. Without giving too much away, I think it's got a sense of a Debo game about it to me. I don't know why, but it does. I think it's
definitely. I think that's
as you said. Lining him up, his versatility is something that could counter the defensive versatility of the Chiefs. Maybe keep them honest a bit.
I think the final thing about this defense is they're not blitzing as much as they have been, but as you said before, sometimes you can only do so much prep, but you see what happens on the day. And it wouldn't surprise me if we come on Monday and we're doing the review show and we're like, bloody hell, the Chiefs blitz for 50-60% of the snaps, or if they didn't blitz. But they seem to be not as aggressive, especially on the third down, which is quite interesting. They seem to have that confidence in the cornerbacks are going to lock them down, and they've got total trust in this system. But yeah, like you said, we need to see Shanahan going to his bag of tricks. You know, we saw it in the Super Bowl. Lee's favourite player, Juwan Jennings, threw for a touchdown. Maybe we see a trick play like that. It's just a shame he's not here, Gareth, to go bolder than bold, because you know Lee.
He had the chance. He could have told us, but no, he wants to wait and hear our predictions before he commits, doesn't he?
He does,
and there is a word for that. And it's not presidential privilege.
I am looking forward to the game before we go into like the score predictions and the boldies. I will say I did struggle with the boldies for this one because of the respect I have got for the Chiefs. They are the best team in the NFL at the moment because they're the current Super Bowl champions. And I know we have a reputation for going bold, but when I was preparing this afternoon, I was kind of thinking, where do I go with this? Because we've kind of gone bold before, and it's come back to bite us in the bum. I'm not mentioning a certain facet of our play because I said that before the Seahawks game. That could be the difference. Special teams, I have to contradict myself. Our special teams is dreadful. The Chiefs is better. However, there's been a couple of roster moves, hasn't there, Gareth? We've added another kicker to the practice squad, I believe. So don't know whether it would be the right stuff. Kicking the ball on Sunday, but
it's not the kicking that's been the problem. It's been the covering the opponent's kick returns. So finally managed to get my words out. Yeah, I don't want to talk about special teams in a preview. So let's move on. Should we look at the betting lines? The Niners are 1.5 point favourites, and the over under is 47. Do you bet against Mahomes in that, even travelling on the road off a bye when you're 5-0?
Yeah, it seems strange to me.
It does.
We were favourites in February according to Vegas, and that felt a little bit wrong to me because, as you said, Mahomes, and I don't know. The Chiefs have got a -4 turnover differential on the season, the 30th in red zone touchdown percentage, and they've actually got a worse defensive DVOA than the Niners, but they've got Patrick Mahomes. So I'm trying to say all this to make you feel better, Gareth, because my scout report might have deflated you, but I don't know, buddy. I think the two evenly matched teams going toe-to-toe, and I said to you in the group chat when I was preparing my score prediction, I've got a sensible one and I've got a bold one. And as Nadgy said a couple of weeks ago, you come on this show and all logic goes out of the window. Now, I do want to say, before we move on, Nadgy Karar was very bullish that his score was right for the Seahawks game. Nadgy, it wasn't. You were nowhere near the correct score. However, when I heard that, similar to when Ashley Cole hurled the Arsenal wage offer and he was screaming at the radio, that was me, Gareth. I was like, I'm not letting you have that, Nadgy. But all jokes aside, it was good to hear you guys chat about the score prediction. And the Discord Could we see this week, Gareth, for the first time, multiple people picking against the Niners?
Well. I think am I still somehow miraculously top? So it's me to go first, I think, with the score predictions. Nadgy's dialed this in. Perhaps I'll come to that in a moment. Yeah, Paul Leah's decided that he's going to hear what other people are going to say, but then again, he is bottom of the table, I think. So anyway, I had this down as the loss at the beginning of the year, but I think someone's going to have to take a first win over the Chiefs, and I think we're going to do it. I think it's going to be a tight one, but I think we are going to just about squeak this one through 23-20.
Gareth Ellis. I write it down because Leah asked us the score. I'm getting this room checked. So to be fair, I don't know whether to change mine now. Mine was 23-20.
Oh, really?
That was the score that I was going. And I have it written down. Ignore the scribbles. But I did, similar to you, I think I'm always going to go for a Niners win. I've talked myself into...
You want clean points. You don't want to actually gather any dirty points. Because, the points are points. But I think morally, clean points.
I will stick to 23-20. And what I'll do, for the interests of making the show interesting, I will reveal my other score on the review show, because my other score was a bit bold. It wasn't Nadgy bold, but I was leading towards a score that would have been seen as ridiculous by some. But I think it'll be 23-20, and I'll get into the breakdown on my scores when we do the bold predictions.
Nadgy dialed his in. Nadgy is going for clean points as well. A Niners win, 26-24.
Yeah. So Gareth was right. When I did the live last night, we finished recording, and Lee was telling me that he's not here tonight, Gareth, because he's dropping Ben and Steve off at the airport because they're flying out to San Francisco. They will be there with many others to watch this game. So I said, you're going to have to put your score prediction in the group chat, Lee. And he chuckled as he does, Gareth, and he was like, no, Paul. Presidential preference here. I'm going to wait until I've heard all yours. Now, I was shocked for about 0.001 seconds. But from doing this show with Gowland, and knowing how competitive he is, Gareth, I thought, yeah,
and
fair enough.
Angry he is being at the bottom. So
he's going to come back with 23-20 now, because that's what me and you have gone for.
He's going for 31-13. Niners loss.
Yeah.
Oh, better not go there. Do you have some boldies to go with that? I'll start. I did say it's going to be a Debo game. I think Debo's going to rush for a touchdown, and Debo's going to throw a touchdown to George Kittle.
Oh, I like that. So I'll stay on the offensive side of the ball. As I said, I think we scored 2 touchdowns. The Chiefs have been quite good in the red zone at stopping the run. So I think we have 2 receiving touchdowns. I've got 1 for Kittle. I've got 1 for Ayuk. But I do have Debo getting 150 all-purpose yards on the night, because I think he's going to be used in both. But I'll swap mine for Debo throwing a touchdown. Connor Ryan would definitely like that, Gareth, so that's a good one.
Yeah. I've got a special teams one. We'll the kicker will survive this game and play another game for us. How about that for bold?
Well, I'm going to say my score needs 3 field goals, and right was the right stuff in Seattle. They weren't pretty, but they were effective. So for my defensive turnovers, Mahomes is going to have 3 turnovers.
Ooh.
Lenore, Warner, and Green are going to get the picks. Leonard Floyd is going to have 3 sacks, because I think the focus is going to be on Bosa. And I think if Leonard Floyd plays well, that could be the key. So there were my bold predictions for this one, Gareth. And we didn't get any from the chaps, did we?
We didn't.
No boldies?
We didn't get any. I hadn't really thought about a defensive boldie there. I think beating Mahomes is probably bold enough. But maybe I should back Green, since I let him down. He is my player watch for the year, and I didn't have him getting his first interception last week. So he's going to double it up. He's going to get one this week.
Well, I nearly went for my boy Garendo, but I didn't want to jinx him because of my disappointment of Ronnie Bell last year, it was great on Thursday night to see
Garendo.
break through. And the new nickname from Discord. But yes, be interesting to see where the Faithfuls score predictions lie for this one. So
they're waiting
Discord,
for us.
They'll be waiting for us, yeah.
Mm.
So that's my baldies, Gareth. I don't think I've got any more. But I do have some stuff about Sunday, but I don't want to jump ahead. Public service announcement.
No, PSA. It's the next thing. I think we've done some boldies. Maybe Lee and Nadgy might get bold on Discord while waiting for the game. But having said that, I think Discord might be a bit quieter this week. Obviously, a little bit because of the watch parties. So,
yeah, I mean, no surprise. We are the Sky game. Sorry for you guys staying at home. If I was at home, I'd be as disappointed as the rest because I'm Game Pass only. I don't have Sky Sports. But when I looked at the fixtures at the start of the season, Gareth, it was going to take a miracle for Sky not to pick the Chiefs versus the Niners. Now, the venue that we're heading to, Louis Liquor Vault in the big market, they'd guaranteed the game regardless, but with it being a Sky game, it makes it very more manageable. And I think Georgina might be looking at a Manchester meet. As it stands at 9 o'clock on Thursday when we've recorded this, there's just the one meet up, which is in Newcastle. If you are heading up to Newcastle, I will be there from about 2 o'clock. Feel free to drop me a message. I think the plan is, Gareth, everyone check in the hotel at 3 o'clock, meet up at a pre-meet, get some food, bit of catch-up, then head to the bar for about 5 o'clock, because obviously the Lions-Vikings game's on at 6, which should be a beauty. Obviously meet up with our hosts, the UK Chiefs group. But I'm looking forward to this one. It's kind of got an old school feel. It feels like when I travelled up to Belushi's in Edinburgh for the Saints game. And if it can be half as good as that game, I will take it. And obviously a cheeky shout out, Johnny Dell, Football Academy, was on the live last night. He is one of the go-to content creators for me. He breaks down plays, he explains the X and O's. So he's having a big push on his YouTube subscriptions and his website. So if you do want more information, please do head over and check him out. He was generous with his time, and honestly, Gareth, he blew me away. I thought I was starting to understand the game from speaking to you fine gentlemen, but watching him in action last night, I was like, wow. So it was pretty amazing.
When he breaks it down, I always think, what are you doing on YouTube? Why aren't you working for some team breaking down film for them? Or like a college team. It's that much. He sees that much. So
there's levels, isn't there? So you talk about like the NFL and you talk about college football. I mean, the kids always laugh at me. I've got 1,000 subs on YouTube, content creating, and that's us as a team, not me. That's us, Gareth. But then someone like Johnny comes on, and then you speak to John Chapman, and you think. But what was good about it? He explained it in such a way that even a novice like myself, I could fully understand what he was doing, but
you thoroughly recommend. Yeah, if you're new to the game or if you've been following the game for years, you'll still learn a lot. And he's got a good choice of what he picks to demonstrate or to show, doesn't he? He picks the right sort of things, important things, it seems.
Well, he got me fired up last night. I was going to come on with a high score prediction because he said he watches every 49ers offensive play. And he said every play this year, Gareth, has been there or thereabouts. There's literally been minute details from us putting 40-plus points up on multiple occasions. And you've got to remember that in this wonderful game of the NFL, it's a matter of inches. But before we finish off, our old friend Martin Hughes will be at the game on Sunday.
The lucky talisman for the team.
He will be flying the flag. Ben Gowland is there. I think Ali Reid is there. I think I said on the live last night there was 6 UK faithful in attendance at Levi's because I think Lee sorted some tickets out for the 6 of them. And Lee pointed out there's more than 6, Paul. He said there's definitely more going that hadn't let him know. So if you are listening to this in Santa Clara, in San Francisco, please do look out for the flag. Please do go up and say hi to the UK faithful. And UK faithful, you know what I'm going to say to you. Tag me. I want to see those flag photos. Totally. And Gareth, NFL Sunday is going to be an exciting time, buddy.
It is. And I think I won't be able to make it up to the watch party. I think it will be slightly different than the official watch parties. It's more of a group meet. It's great that the Chiefs invited us. I'm sure they were happy to have us there. But I think we can find a lot of common ground, I think, with some of the Chiefs fans. I'm sure we're all entertained by what's going on at the Dallas Cowboys, because let's face it, everybody is. I think we're all entertained, perhaps, at not having Aaron Rodgers on our side. And of course, the one thing that we have in common, of course, is our mutual friend, the Las Vegas Raiders, which there's very little love for, I think, amongst either fan base. And they appear to be going into full tank mode, obviously, with Devontae on his way to Aaron in New York with his miraculously recovered hamstring. So, enjoy it, I think, at the watch party. We can enjoy the game. It's a fairly low-stakes game. So I think enjoy it. And the thing about that is you want to be playing against the best, and the Chiefs have shown that for years that they are. And that's what you've got to put your benchmark against, is beating teams like that, and you only get to beat teams like that by playing against them. So it's got to be done.
I know there's a few faithful down at London for the Patriots-Jags game. I think they're arranging to meet up. So would it be in the Sky game as well?
Patriots-Jags, wow.
That was...
We really do get them in London, don't we?
I know Wayne...
Literally the games America doesn't want.
But it could be a high-scoring game. But the good news with the Niners being on Sky, I think for those people based in London, if you're unsure where to head, I have shared the link in our group. The venue that held the official London watch party will be showing the games because they're an official NFL partner. And like you said, I think for Newcastle, I think there's 40 49ers fans. I've got a Cowboys fan joining us. I've got a Lions fan joining us. And the Chiefs have said, I think we're going to outnumber them 3-1. But all jokes aside, it was gracious of the Chiefs fans to reach out to us. They've done all the hard work. They've done all the arranging. All they asked was, could I share it on social media? Happy to oblige, chaps. It's a shame you can't join us, Gareth, but I do appreciate Newcastle isn't close to everybody. But
it's not close to anybody.
No, and El Presidente has had to make a business decision because I think Sunderland are playing on the afternoon, so he's decided to stay at home to watch that one. Of all the places to watch Sunderland play, you don't want to be watching in Newcastle, and I promised I'd get that in. But for those guys that are at Levi's, have a blast.
Absolutely.
Gareth, it has been amazing. We need to do this more often. We need to have a chat about football, just me and you.
Just the two of us. Cozy, isn't it? But thank you, Paul. It has been a pleasure. It would be sad with Lee and Nadgy. We have to let them back in, don't we, I suppose, but they'll get upset. But anyway, thank you. And thank you to everyone who listens and watches the show. If you do want Game Time company, the Discord will be on, maybe a bit quieter with the watch party. And of course, Facebook posting will be off during the game, but Eric's post-game reaction thread will be alive and well around midnight, I imagine, if you want to vent or celebrate. And we will be back, hopefully all four of us, next week to review the game. This one, it doesn't matter, but it kind of does. There are bigger games that we could win, but winning this one, I think, would be special. Enjoy the game and go Niners.
Go Niners.
We love the San Francisco 49ers deep in our heart. Like Joe Montana in the corner, D. Clark. Garrison Hurst, stiff farm going 99. Don't get it twisted, one and all with prime time. John Taylor, Jerry Rice down the